We met 32 years ago in Berlin when he was setting up his first big show at the National Gallery in 91. And we met by poor chance because he decided to have dinner on his own. He worked for three weeks at the National Gallery to set up the show. You can see it in the film, and he had these big LED airplanes there and giant paintings. And it was a big show, and it took him 3 years to set it up. And he came to a restaurant in my neighborhood by chance because somebody had told him they had good food. It was a Viennese restaurant. And when he came in, the only place left was at my table. I was sitting there alone because I was working next door in my editing room. And he sat next to me and we started to talk. And I realized, oh, this is ANSELM Kiefer. And he realized, oh, this is Wim Wenders. And we had a nice evening and talked a lot. And when we were the last people to leave the restaurant, and he said, you come here often? You come again tomorrow? And we met again the next day, and it became a tradition. We almost met for 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks, almost every night. And we really got to know each other. And so he got to know my secret that I had wanted to become a painter, and I got to know his secret that he really would love to make movies. So that led to the fact that we said we're bound to do something together. But it took us 30 years to make it happen. We wanted to do this for 30 years, but nothing really triggered it. And whenever we saw each other, we reminded each other of the idea we wanted to do this. And then ANSELM finally called me one day in 2019, by now almost 4 years ago, and said, Wim, I just realized you've never been to Barjac. And I said, that's true. And he said, I think you should come whenever you can arrange a couple of days, take the train, get up in Avignon, I pick you up and I take you here. And a few weeks later, I did have the time and I came and visited him. And that's when I saw that territory for the first time. The whole landscape that he transformed, and where he built these towers and underground tunnels and this crypt and 20 buildings with galleries and all of these things. And he had the very good instinct to just drop me and put a map into my hand and say, well, you're on your own. Everything is open. You can walk in anywhere, and you understand that everything is connected underground, and have fun, and you see me tonight. So I did spend the whole day on my own there. And as you've seen the film, you know a little bit how you feel when you're there. And I was exposed to all of this quite unique artscape. I was quite overwhelmed. And in the evening when we met again, I said, well, I know now why you wanted me to come. And let me just say one word. I think we better do it now. It's now or never. And he laughed and said, yeah, that's why I wanted you to come. Because we're both getting older, and before I start forgetting things, I think we should rather do this. And I said, okay, let's do it. And we started 6 months later. And we then shot over 2.5 years, 7 times. I told him from the beginning, I think I need to come to lots of places, not only here to Barjac, but also to your studio in Croissy. And it won't be, I cannot do it in one go. And it then took me 7 shooting installments so that the thing could slowly grow together. And I would edit for almost 3 years in order to put this puzzle together and to understand better how I could get a grasp on this tremendous piece of work. No, not really. We started in Bajac. The first shoot was there, and then I went home. We shot for 2 weeks in Bajac. We shot a lot of it in Bajac, and then I edited then, and then I visited him in Croissy, and we shot in Croissy for 10 days. And then I went back to my editing room, and I always had these weeks and months alone with the material, so I would understand, so I could see what can people experience and what we've shot so far, and what else do they need to know. And then I realized I had to see Bajac at a different season. I had to come back at least one more time to Croissy studio. Eventually, I wanted to also dive into his past and get to know the period when he was an unknown painter that no art gallerist or art critic or art historian ever visited for the first 10 years of his work. And finally, I also wanted to see a little bit of his childhood. So it slowly came together. And I must say, when we started, apart from the fact that I realized I needed 3D in order to make it a valuable experience for the audience, that I could really share and that I could really take them to these places, and that I could really make them see so much, because it is a fact that you just simply see more in 3D than you've ever seen on a flat screen. So, and you're more there, and you're actually more involved, and your brain is involved in other ways in a 3D movie. So I needed all that. So, and ANSELM knew from the beginning that we were going to do this in 3D, and he agreed to it, but he didn't really know what it meant. He had seen Pina, and he thought that was nice in 3D. But he only understood when he finally saw the film why 3D was an invaluable element of putting the experience of his art on a screen and make it something that people could really be exposed to. I still think of the film more than an experience than an actual movie, somehow. Of course, it's a movie because you can also see it in 2D, but it is most of all an experience, and other than other movies about painters, it's not so much an opinion on what he does, or it's not so much an explanation, but I just try to let the work talk as much as possible. In the case of ANSELM, I think it's particularly difficult because he's just not afraid of anything. And he's painted subjects that other painters have never even touched. He's painted the universe, and he can paint history, and he can paint myth, and he did paint our country of Germany. He did paint the universe. He's just not afraid of anything, and he feels that painting can really touch on everything, on our whole existence, in a very complete way. And I don't know any other painter whose idea of painting is so vast and knows no limits. So it was a little scary to start it, especially as when we agreed that we would do it and shook hands on it, and ANSELM said, I don't want to be involved in the making, and don't show me any treatment, and just promise me one thing, that in the end I'm going to be surprised, because that's actually the only thing I expect from you, is to surprise me. So I accepted that. So I was going to surprise him, but then he surprised me, because then, as we started to smoke a cigar, he said, don't you think, Wim, that the most boring part of any movie about a painter is to see him paint or her paint? And I said, wait a minute, what do you mean? Yeah, he said, remember, if you ever saw a movie about a painter, don't you think the most boring part was when they painted? And I said, do you think I should not see you while you're painting? And he said, exactly. Who wants to see a painter paint? And I said, I would like to see you paint. And I don't think I can really make this movie without being there when you're working. Really? Isn't it enough to show the work? No, I want to see the process. So he finally, a little bit reluctantly, agreed to that idea. But that was the hardest obstacle, and it is totally true. He did have a point. I realized that. In a strange way, it is almost impossible to see a painter paint. And when he said that, I was pretty scared that I would make something that in itself would be what's the word for that? Would be repetitious, and that seeing him at work would not explain more than seeing the work or show more. But in the end, I think 3D helped a lot to get deeply into the process of his work and to understand why he does all these things to his paintings, and to slowly understand why time is so much incorporated into all his work, into the layers and the way he submits his painting to fire and lead and all sorts of procedures. He bakes them in an oven. He does a lot of things to submit them to time. And time is so much a process that I work with as a filmmaker. I mean, not process. Time is a material I work with as a filmmaker. Every shot you do as a filmmaker is a little piece of time. And then in the editing, you try to make a structure out of that. And I felt that using a lot of time to shoot him at work and to let time inform me more and more about him and his work was the only way to slowly get to present his work and to make it something that other people could experience through my film. It was a long process. I've never worked on any film so long. That's a good question. I mean, we did start out the same way. We were born right 1945. We were born in a country that was gone and didn't exist anymore, really was no longer existent. And the people who were left tried to invent it from scratch. And the way they were hoping to do it, and they were going about to do it, was to just pretend there was no past. They couldn't deal with it. So in order to rebuild the country, they pretended it was a country with no past. They decided we have to forget. And when you grow up in a country like this, you feel that. Already as a child, you feel it subconsciously. And then when you grow up and become a little older, and then you realize what is happening and what has been happening to your own life, that you were born into a country that just presented a future of itself and maybe jumping way back into the past, but the immediate past before its existence was gone. So, and when I did realize that, I must say, I don't know, 14, 15, 16 years of age, or maybe it starts earlier, my own impulse was to leave it behind. I had a very, very strong feeling from my childhood on that I wanted to leave this country behind. And in many ways, I did that in my work, at least for the first half of it. I really went wherever I could go I went to America. I lived for a long time in America. I went to Australia, to Japan, to Cuba. I left the country behind. And ANSEM did the opposite. He really dug deep into it, and he put his finger on the wounds, and he fought hard against forgetting, against this whole communal act of forgetting that the country had been exposed to. And fighting forgetting was almost the ethos of his work. And I only did that much later in my work. I had to live for a long time in America to get to terms with me being a German and a German romantic. And it's only after a long time of working in America, I realized I was German through and through, and I was a romantic at heart, and I accepted being a German. And I accepted not ever being an American, and I couldn't make American movies. And I was going to be a European filmmaker for the rest of my life. And that's when I returned after Paris, Texas, and made Wings of Desire, which was really the movie of somebody who was coming home. And that's also the first time I faced a little bit of, or I faced at least the history of Berlin, or also the history of Germany. The film touches on that. But when we made that film, ANSEM and I, one of the tasks was, for me, was also to find out the very different approaches of our lives, really. And that we had two, not exactly diametrically opposite, but we had two very different attitudes towards this country that we grew up in. And he really faced it and dug deep, and I avoided it. And part of the film was, for me, was also to get over that, and by showing his process, also acknowledging it, and also showing how much I had a respect for that kind of work that he did, and that I did not do. I mean, other filmmakers did it. Fassbinder himself, Rainer Werner Fassbinder, worked a lot on the history of Germany and never really left the country. And I was the one who was gone before any of the other ones. I think it's a key to ANSEM's work. I really do think so. I really think that the kid that he was born in 45, and the landscape and the country, the non-existent country he was born into, I think made a huge impression on any kid, and me too. I grew up in ruins, a little bit like ANSEM. Düsseldorf was 85 or 90% destroyed, and I really, the first years of my life, didn't see anything else but ruins. So we took it for granted that that was the world. And that's a very, very strong impression to start your life on. And it was a lasting, I think it had a lasting impact on both of our lives, even if it was in different ways. And I felt that with all his creative impulses and with this unbelievable energy of creating so much work as he did, I mean, it's almost inconceivable that one man has all of this that you see in the film. And then he's afraid of no subject, neither history, nor Germany, nor poetry, nor myth, nor the universe. I mean, for him, everything can be painted. And that, I felt, was only possible, and I'm quite convinced of it. And the film really shows it too, as you said. In the end, the adult ANSELM has his own child, the child that he was on his shoulders. So I think ANSELM really, truly managed to keep that child in him alive. And that child that was born into this particular place in history and on the planet, I think he was able to keep that child alive. And that is an immensely curious child. And ANSELM is one of the few people I know who really, really remained the child that he still carries in himself. Not many creative people are so much in touch with their own childhood than this man, I feel.